Welcome to the Main Basketball Rankings podcast. I'm your host, basketball data nerd Lucas McNelly, and we're back after a short break. Took a week off to try to get caught up on things, and spoiler alert, did not get caught up on anything, but did watch a lot of basketball during the tournament. So let's do that first. Cooper, I think he exceeded everyone's expectations. I mean, I know it sucks that the shot didn't go down in the game against Houston at the very end and that they kind of fell apart as a team, but I feel that wasn't on him. He was the best player in that game. He had just a fantastic tournament from beginning to end, and we were all kind of worried, after the ACC tournament, how's the ankle going to look after that injury? He looked fantastic. I think he represented the state of Maine extremely well. Had the best commercial in March Madness. That bingo commercial was just fantastic. And he was awesome in every single game in the tournament. And it was just crazy to think, we keep saying it. This is the kid who is supposed to be finishing his senior year at Nokomis, and he's supposed to be, playing games at Lawrence and at Skowhegan. And instead, here he is playing on national television on the biggest stage of all. And people like Charles Barkley just can't stop saying how impressed they are with how he's playing. I grew up a Duke fan because Bobby Hurley was my guy, and that's how old I am. So I was very excited for him to come to Duke, and obviously wanted Duke to win the whole thing. Disappointed they didn't, but going into it as a Mainer, I was thinking, well, they'll be fine. We'll win another title sometime in the next couple years. My priorities were I wanted Cooper to play really well. I wanted everyone to see just how special of a player he is. And you'd see people on social media going, oh, is this white boy really that good? How good is he really? He's just going to be a rotational guy. And I think that was all gone by the end of the tournament. So that was goal number one for me, was for him to play as well as we all knew he could play, and to do it on the biggest stage. And, some of the other top prospects in the draft, not so much. And some, like Walter Clayton Jr., played fantastic. And then I wanted to, if they didn't win the whole thing, I didn't want him to be the reason that they didn't. I think we all saw the games early in the year where he slipped going, for the big play and fell down once or twice, I think it was. And you just didn't want it to be something like that. You didn't want it to be a turnover. You didn't want it to end, honestly, the way it ended for Houston in the next game, where they just completely fell apart. Duke lost that game because their center couldn't get a rebound and because they couldn't inbound the ball in the final minute. And they got out coached down the stretch. And Shire's, third season as a coach, he's going to get out coached by Sampson. That's going to happen. And they lost because their guards didn't show up. And they didn't lose because Cooper was awesome. So it's on to the NBA draft, unless somebody can convince him to get in the transfer portal and come to Maine and, play a year with his brother. And I'll just say that it's one thing to get to the Final Four playing for Duke. That's, I don't play Madden, but, that's a one level. And then there's the much harder level on Madden or on 2K, where you go to Maine and get Maine to the Final Four. And that's, that's the expert level, the all-star level, whatever it is. The hardest level would be if you get Maine to the Final Four. I'm just putting that out there. That's all I'm saying. I think he's going to go into the NBA draft, and I think he's going to get drafted, and I'm hoping he gets drafted by the Jazz, and Danny Ainge doesn't break him, because the Wizards might break him. They can break just about anything. And then I hope Danny does solid, and he ends up in Boston, but that's just my goals. The other thing, there's really a lot to talk about, but I don't want to drag this out because the interviews coming up is a little long. So, yeah, we have spring sports coming up, so there's that. And then reclassification went through. It's basically what I reported back in December. A couple tweaks here and there. St. Dom's is not there. That's, the other big news is that St. Dom's is no longer a school at the end of this year. So we do not have a defending champion in Class D, which is crazy. And you really feel for everyone there, especially Josh Laprelle, who built that program. And I mean, he was just on the show talking about building that program, and then just to have it all yanked away, it's got to be devastating. So there's that, and that's not great. But time marches on, I guess. What was I saying? So yeah, so reclassification. It's basically, I think it's going to be really interesting. I think they solved the double A problem. They by solving maybe the class D problem. I don't know how solvable the class D problem is because you get to a point where if you got 30 kids, if there's not some basketball players in there, and I mean like some good basketball players, you're gonna struggle to beat anybody. And I think the doing the under 100 works because the difference of 50 kids at the difference between 50 kids and 100 kids is a lot bigger than the difference between 400 kids and 500 kids, or even between 400 kids and 600 kids in terms of being able to field a competitive team. So hopefully this under 100 class S thing will at least minimize the number of blowouts we get in that lowest class. And we'll see. And really the only way to fix that is to have more teams and to have some of these smaller schools that have gone away come back. But that's kind of like trying to get the manufacturing jobs back by imposing tariffs. Is not going to work because it's just not going to work because of reality. And you're not going to bring factories back to Detroit because first of all, people want to work in them, and you don't want to people don't want to be coal miners in West Virginia. It's not a great gig. And so some of these schools in Aroostook County are just not coming back because the people aren't there to be in the schools. So there's no perfect solution. I think this is a pretty good one though. And so we'll see how it plays out, but I think it's pretty good. I think A and B and all four classes really of the normal classes, they're going to be harder. It's going to be harder to win a gold ball next year. But they're going to be really competitive, and we're going to get some really, really great tournaments out of it. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, I think it should be fun. So my guest today is Erik Atwell. Erik is a former screenwriter who has come to Maine. He's from away. Don't shut the show off. Don't skip to something else. It's okay. You'll be all right. He's from New Hampshire. It's not that far. You'll be fine. The guy from New Hampshire, by way of Los Angeles, by way of Seattle, was a screenwriter and then ended up in Maine writing for the Weekly Packet and the Castine paper, which the Castine Patriot, I think. I had it on me when I was doing the interview, and then I threw it across the room, and now I can't see it, and I think it's the Castine Patriot. But yeah, I had him on because he's a new addition to the sports media landscape in Maine. I thought it'd be fun to have him on, see what his deal is. And yeah, it's a fun conversation. So without a further ado, let's go to my conversation with Erik Atwell. My guest today is the sports reporter from the Castine Patriot and the other papers of the Penobscot Bay Press, Erik Atwell. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Lucas.
So I have a copy here of the Castine Patriot.
Sure.
Which I read religiously because at my day job, we print the Castine Patriot.
I know, that's wild. When I found out that you did that and you were looking at a headline of something before I even knew it was out there. So I think that's pretty funny. So
it's a weird little paper because it's very short because Castine's not very big, is my understanding. And there's always a weird story in it. And so as we print it, we're always like, what is going on in this town? Because you got to write about something. And sometimes it's like, a bear is walking down Main Street or something. And you're just like, okay, that's our headline. Let's do it.
It's funny. If you get the demographics of this town, you look around the peninsula, and Blue Hill, average age is 50. And Brooklyn, Sedgwick, Surrey, average age is 50. You get to Castine, the average age is 23.
Weird.
And then you realize they're factoring in all the Maine Maritime Academy students. Because I'm about five minutes away from MMA, so that's and that brings 1,000 kids to this town, 9-10 months of the year. Other than that, it's quiet.
There was a fun story about how like some sort of town meeting where like the Facebook Live wasn't working, and that was the big issue, and they couldn't figure it out, and we were just like, okay, all right, that's a story, all right.
It's a quirky little town for sure. You know, it's one of those towns you can absolutely people in the downtown area, they have golf carts to get around.
Oh my
And,
gosh,
and
really?
on the main streets, you know, and there's
What?
golf carts and it's a really historic town. I guess somewhere in the 1800s or late 1700s, this was the second richest town in America. And a lot of
Really?
a lot of the architecture is, you know, sort of what style is it? I don't know. It begins with an F. I can't
Hmm.
remember what style it is though, but it's a lot of the entire downtown area is on the National Register of Historic Places, I think. And you walk around downtown and you feel like you're maybe in the 50s Mayberry RFD. You know, it's pretty.
Huh.
It's a safe
Interesting.
area. Yeah.
Safe area. All right. So let's back up a little bit. You're new
Sure.
to the area, right? You haven't been there very long, I don't think.
Yeah, comparatively not so long. We got here in October of 2023,
Okay.
and I applied on a whim for this job as the sports reporter. And you know, I my previous job as a breakfast cook at a bed and breakfast probably really prepped me for this particular
Yeah.
job. I think I was right in line for it. But no, but as a writer from a previous life and a sports junkie, I knew the language that was required for sports journalism. And so I kind of knew that this was something I could do if given the chance. And I had some great meetings with, you know, the editor, Nat Barrows of the paper, and got the chance. And
Very cool.
that very night, I was sent to a GSA Bucksport uh, Class C North playoff game in
Oh,
Bucksport against #1 seed Bucksport. And I knew nobody. And
sure.
I'm at this game and I get a roster that day. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, okay, so #8 passes to #12. #12 shoots, and it, you know, I don't know anybody. And I'm trying to craft this story, which GSA is winning this game, and it's an upset, so to speak, you know, seating wise. And
Yeah.
it was going well, but I knew I needed to know the personalities. So and I don't have a camera. They didn't have a camera for me. So I'm on my
No.
cell phone. It's also about 28 degrees. And
Okay, so this is fall sports.
yeah, this is the
Okay.
soccer, and it's late October, early November, and
Okay.
so that was my indoctrination. You know, I had no idea what I was doing, but I was going to do it.
There you
And
go.
you know, they won that game and went on to the regional finals, won that game, and then they went on to, you know, state championship game down in Topsom and
Okay.
against Mount Abram, who was mighty at that point. They had won
Yeah, that was
17, lost 0, scored 85 goals, and given up about 3.
they
And
were the I they might have been nationally ranked, actually.
I think you're right. I think I did come to find that afterwards. They were nationally ranked, and
Their
they
coach
were
won
good.
coach of the year, some
Yep,
small
they did.
school coach of the year or something.
And then he moved on somewhere else, and I don't know
He's a
where he went to. But
Spruce now.
okay,
He
okay,
took a
so yeah,
year off and now he's a Spruce.
and they were as good as you can imagine. But GSA hung in. They, you know, they gave up an own goal about 15 minutes in. They were overwhelmed, but then they found their footing and started pressuring in the second half and
Hmm.
just came up short. But it was such a wild ride. And at this point, I'm at this story and I'm 8 days into my sports journalism career. And I'm down in Topsom. I'm following the team, and you know, at this point, they've embraced me, and I've embraced them, and these are my kids suddenly, you know.
Yeah.
And it just took off. Like I realized I came home and I had to nail an incredible story because just in these days, I found these kids were so close to one another, and it was fun. It was fun, and it reminded me of my own soccer team. You know, back in 1912, something
Yeah.
like that. You know? And so
Sure.
it was close to home, and I wrote a story that I thought really captured their spirit. You know, wins and losses aren't necessarily reflected on the scoreboard. It's about the heart of the kids, and you
Hmm.
know, boom.
David versus Goliath, that sort of
It
thing.
was. It was definitely. I think I referenced that at one point. You know, and David had a shot. He had a shot, but Goliath ended up pulling it out. And
had had you done any sports writing before then, like in high school, like the student paper or anything like that?
never,
No.
never. This was just based on, you know, reading. You know, you know what sports. You know what a game story looks like.
Yeah.
And you know, I do have 2 college degrees in writing, which again prepped me for my breakfast chef career.
I mean, those
And
are extremely valuable writing
you know, when I
degrees.
had kids, I realized that waiting tables made a lot more money than writing books.
Yep.
So that's how I got into the restaurant industry. And then, this was great, but I know how to write. I knew how to write. And I'd been in California and worked in screenwriting. I'd written a novel in a past life, and this was something that probably should have been a career I should have attempted years and years prior to this, but I came into it later and grateful for it.
You got into the really worst time to be a sports writer.
You think?
Historically, it's sort of all falling apart. But so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about screenwriting. So you were you
Sure.
did the LA thing, you did the
Yeah.
screenwriting. Like how, like, was that a thing where you just like, I can't do this anymore because I got kids, or
No,
because
well,
it's a nightmare of a thing to try to attempt.
it is, and I know you have experience in that too. And I think I went out to California in my 20s. I went to USC Film School, and that was a big deal. And I went on a challenge from a friend of mine who was at USC Film School. And because I wrote a screenplay, I was working in a video store, and I thought,
Sure.
much like this whole sports writing thing, I was like, I can write this. I can write a screenplay. So I did.
How hard could it be?
Yeah, and so I did, and I approached USC Film School with no real backup plan. I was late for my application, and they extended me and let me in. And next thing I know, 3 months later, I'm driving from northern New Hampshire to Los Angeles, and a little shocking, but there I was, and made some great connections, and was on the periphery of the film industry for, I don't know, 10, 12 years, and getting things optioned but never made. And this was a little before digital filmmaking. It was there, but it wasn't as easily accessible. So you couldn't really
Like
make
late
your own movie.
90s?
Yeah, yeah. This
Okay.
is, Roger Avery, Quentin Tarantino,
Yeah.
their heyday. I want to say, who else was it? Robert Rodriguez, and so kept trying to write screenplays. They were good. I have some good screenplays that are never going to see the light of day, but I think that's a story of a lot of screenwriters out there.
Yeah.
And one day I decided I like this idea for a screenplay, but it's never going to get made, so I'm going to turn it into a novel. And I did that, and it never sold, but it taught me how to write a novel, and then my second novel did sell. So
Did you consider turning the novel, since it's then existing IP, then writing the screenplay? And like, hey, it's
I
based
did.
on this novel.
I did consider that. At that point, I'd left Los Angeles for Seattle, and
Ah, okay.
and so I was like, no looking back. I'm done. I'm done. I'd been there for 19 years between
Oh,
Los
wow.
Angeles and San Francisco, so I was done, and it was fun. I don't regret a second of it, but yeah, it was a merciless business, and I think I wasn't the type of personality to be pushy,
Yeah.
which is, I think, what you need to do. You need to really be self-promoting, and
Mhm.
that's not me in the slightest. So I tried to let my words do the talking for me, but it wasn't enough.
I took the opposite approach where I was like, I'm never gonna probably move to LA, and I
Mhm.
can't do the LA pushy thing. And I get out there and I'm like there for a week, and I'm like, I get out of here. This is
Yeah,
driving me crazy. It's fun for like a week. And so I took the indie approach, and which hasn't been any more successful, but I've gotten movies made just because they're so low budget that
yeah,
they get made, because you can sort of force them into existence if your budget's low enough. And then I just sort of, the screenwriting angle was, well, I got to make it, so it's got to be cheap enough that
right.
I can make it for whatever this very small number is, and sort of work backwards from there.
Yeah, and the constraints that you probably place upon yourself because you want to be creative, but at the same time you want to be scientific and think money. What's this
Hmm.
going to cost if I do this to this scene? And then you drove your budget up by 25% more, and you don't want to do that. And
Yeah,
I
and
can't
then
imagine trying to get back into filmmaking right now. I did take some director classes when I was at SC, and it was neat. Learned a lot, but I just can't imagine trying to do that now.
there's all this small stuff. Like on the last thing I shot, I was like, okay, so we'll do a scene where he's on a boat and he's just getting off the boat and walking onto land. And I'm talking to a producer, he's like, that's gonna like triple your budget for your insurance. I'm like,
Right.
why? Like, because he's on the water. I'm like, he's on the water for like 5 seconds. Like, he's on the water. And I'm
That's
like, you
when you just
got
get
it.
your that's when you just get your friends and say, if you fall in, I'm real sorry. Don't sue me.
Yeah, well, then you cut, and then you're like, well, I guess we're not doing, then we got to do something else here
Yeah.
because we don't have that in the budget. So it's a lot of, you sort of have to teach yourself those workarounds. And then it's a lot of the science of it going, okay, what do I have for free
Yeah.
or what can I get for nothing, and work out from there and be like, okay, so like I did a film set in the woods and we had this hunting camp that looks creepy, and I was like, okay, so I have a creepy hunting camp when I have the woods. So
Yeah.
there's your starting point, and then
There, your
what's the
Blair Witch
story
right
here?
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're going into Blair Witch Project almost immediately,
Hmm.
but it's fun. So yeah, okay. So then how do you end up, so you're in Seattle for a little while, which
Yep.
has a pretty good independent film culture, by the way.
It
I'm
does,
sure
and
I'm
that is
sure
where
you
I.
know.
That's where my yeah, it does. But that's where I was focused on the second novel. I moved up
Okay.
there. I was in the middle of writing it, finished it while I was up there. Found an independent publisher in Seattle who was a startup at that point. Since gone out of business and not supporting my book anymore. But it was a neat little thing, and they put the book out. And 3 weeks later, my son came out, and then it became which is my priority. I
Yeah, you're like,
supported my son.
sorry, kid.
I had to choose, am I supporting my son or my book, and I went with my son. So
I mean, the kids are a lot more expensive than the book could have royalties.
yeah,
So,
yeah. It's
I
but
mean,
it was a fun little book. It was in the chick lit genre,
okay.
and it was a story about a woman, having an early midlife crisis, and she wants to reunite the all girl garage band that she was in the '80s with her high school
Okay.
pals, and so she sets off on this wacky crusade to get the band back together.
Can people
And
still purchase this book?
yeah,
Is it on
I had,
Amazon?
it is still on Amazon. Yeah.
You have boxes in your garage?
I have 2 boxes. I have about 60 copies, but I
Figured
yeah,
you might.
at one point, I believe whose memoir was I ahead of? Nicole Richie's in
Wow.
sale. I was for just one day, I got a boost from some sort of book blog that,
Okay.
sent me, into some massive sales, but it was labor of love, it wasn't a day job at all,
Sure.
but I get to say I did that. And when the publisher went under, there went all the support, so I kind of turned it into self-publish. I used the
Yeah.
same template, I got all my stuff back and found, a way to self-publish it, so it's gonna live there forever on Amazon and Kindle.
Well, at least you're able to get your stuff back, because a lot of times in that
Yes.
situation, it just goes away and
Yeah.
nobody can figure out who even owns it anymore.
Right, I get it back in, like, 75 years, which,
Yeah. That's
not
a
so
big
very.
help. So when
Yeah,
is this
exactly.
that you're roughly in Seattle?
Help say again?
When is this that you're roughly in Seattle?
I'm roughly in Seattle in 2009, and we left there in 2012.
Okay. So
So
I was in Seattle at that same time for like a half
you're
a
kidding.
summer. Yeah, no.
Really? What part?
Yeah. Where was I? I was all over. So I
Okay.
did this project in 20, I think 11,
Okay.
called A Year Without Rent, where I spent a
Mhm.
year living out of my car, and I traveled around the country. And the deal was, I will come to your independent film and I will work for free, do whatever job you need, anything from like a PA to a like gaffer. I think is as high up in the food chain as I got.
Yep.
And I would blog about it for like Filmmaker Magazine and a bunch of other different places. And you had to find me a place to sleep, was the
That's
deal.
fantastic.
And
So
so
you
I
were
did,
all over Seattle. Yeah,
I was all over Seattle.
we were in the Greenwood area. I don't know if you're familiar with Greenwood, Green Lake, Finney Ridge,
Maybe.
Ballard.
Oh yeah, Ballard. Yeah, we did one
Yeah,
in
so
Ballard.
not so far from Ballard, probably
We
3 miles
did one
from it.
on an island, and then I was on another one that I don't remember where it was, and then I was on
Okay.
one that was all over the place, that Matthew Lillard directed, called
Okay.
Fat Kid Rules
Um,
the World. And
I remember Matthew Lillard. Yeah, sure.
yeah, so I worked on that, and so we were on top of a parking garage roof,
Hmm.
and there's a scene where I spent like half a day sitting on a corner downtown somewhere watching
Yeah.
a light to make sure no one ran off with it. So it's all
Gla
sorts of
sounds
highly,
glamorous.
it's super
Filmmaking is so
glamorous.
glamorous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I ended up like that summer I done like 3 or 4 Seattle projects, and it ended up going back and forth like Seattle to San Francisco, and then I'd go back down to
Sure.
San Francisco, and then I'd go back to Seattle, and then I'd be in LA. Then my car was in Seattle for like a month while I went to England and did a film in Newcastle and then gave a speech in Berlin, and my car was in some guy's parking lot or some guy's driveway for
Yeah.
a couple weeks. And I did this really dumb thing where I was flying from Seattle to London, and I got to the airport. I go to check in, and they're like, "You can't check in yet." I'm like, What do you mean? My flight's in 2 hours." They're like, "No, your flight's in 26 hours." It's like June or July at this point, and I'm exhausted. I've been on fumes because I started in January 1st. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what do you mean? And everybody else is that I know in Seattle is on set and they're way off on location. And I can't get a hold of anybody. And so I spent like an entire day wandering around Seattle with my suitcase and my luggage trying to find something to do
I think
before I could
that was a
fly
good
out.
time. That was a good time to be in Seattle. There's some good
Yeah.
summers for sure there. So, and I love Seattle too. But when our son was born in 2011, um, we kind of made a conscious effort to not have a city childhood
Okay.
for our family. And I grew up in northern New Hampshire, and my wife grew up in Massachusetts, up in the Cape Ann area. So we're both New Englanders, and
Okay.
we kind of set our sights on coming back to New England, and we ended up going back to my hometown and stayed there until we moved here, 18 months ago.
So how do you end up in Blue Hill or Castine? It's Blue Hill, right? You're in Blue Hill?
Yeah, I live in Castine. My wife is the town administrator in Blue Hill.
Okay.
So it was a job opportunity that she pounced on, and they took her, and I was portable, again,
Yeah.
breakfast shop.
Writer.
I thought, there's probably a restaurant somewhere in Blue Hill that could
There's
hire me.
gotta
And
be.
yeah, there's gotta
Tourist
be.
spot.
Exactly. So it was, we wanted to move to the coast of Maine eventually from New Hampshire, but this town kind of chose us as much as
Okay.
we chose it. And I think I told you we were looking at Damascotta actually at one point,
Yeah.
many months before this opportunity found.
Well, that probably would have been when John Duke left Damascotta to go to Rockport,
Yes, I think you're right.
who is a big Camden Hills. He's been on this podcast several times. He's a
Oh
big
yeah.
Camden Hills. His son, as Will Duke, was
Oh, I've heard the name. Yeah, sure, I've heard
yeah,
that
was
name.
a Mr. Basketball semifinalist, I
Yeah.
think, and plays at SMCC now.
Yes, I've heard that name for sure. Maybe through you on your
Probably.
podcast or mentions, but yeah, I
Yeah,
recognize the name.
that's a
And
very, very weirdly small world.
it is. It is. So Blue Hills where we were, and we, once we got to the peninsula, we got a rental for 8 months through the winter, and while we decided where we were going to buy a house, and now Castine is the house that chose us, and we're here reassembling it from the ground up, and
Nice.
just kind of making it home. So
How long were you there before they started to tell you about the heyday of GSA's basketball program, which you just missed?
I did, and it's still the same coach, Dwayne Carter. He's great.
Hmm.
They, believe it or not, were pretty humble about it.
Really?
He talks about, our goal every year is to win the state title, but you recognize that each team is its own animal, and it's not necessarily going to be that way, but that's still the goal. And there's
Yeah.
always a lot of talent there. And but yeah, I missed the Taylor Shildroth era, I
I was
believe
going
it
to say
was.
there's talent there, but there's not always a Taylor Shildroth there.
No, there isn't. There's a sister there. Maya Shildroth
Okay.
is a senior, graduating senior, and she's really terrific person and has been very important to the program. But yeah, so it's I think, obviously COVID did a number on everything.
In so
Gee,
many ways.
yeah, and my newspaper used to have quite a dedicated sports presence before COVID, but from 2020 till the time I got there, they had not covered a thing. And
Wow.
yeah, nothing at all. And they decided that they wanted to get back into it right at the time that I moved. I literally answered their first ad in the paper like that. As soon as I saw it, I'm like, well, I'm going to do this if I can.
So they just
So
weren't covering it at all.
they weren't. It's a small
Wow.
paper, so
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's very small.
yeah, and sometimes half of it's ads. I think there's been times when there's only like 8 pages per paper, and
Hmm.
just,
I think this one is eight
unfortunately, it's a
pages.
business that has to meet the money too. So,
Right.
but yeah, so I'm aware of that past history, but that was a different athletic director, and I think enrollment's lower than it used to be, so expectations are tempered yet still high, and
Hmm.
it was neat because I came into a basketball team last year that had high hopes and got upset in the prelim game as I want to say a 6 seed. They were
That sounds
14.
right.
Yeah, they were 14-4, and Dexter came in and got them. And that team graduated 8 seniors, including the entire starting lineup. So I didn't know what this team was going to be all about coming in. They had some freshmen came in. Colby Eaton somehow grew about 4 inches and
That always
wider,
helps.
and he's a monster. He's a terrific kid and a terrific player too. So it'd be fun to watch him develop over the next couple of years. He's got such a high basketball IQ. But I thought this was a team that might win 6 games, and they ended up winning 12, and get a lot of experience for the future. They only have 2 seniors leaving this year. So.
And was Eaton the one who had a couple buzzer beaters? Buzzer
Yes,
beaters?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
And he was the defensive player of the year in the Penobscot Valley Conference as a freshman. And
Wow.
there's just so much to work with. I can't even. He's wiry. Who's my comp for him? I don't even know. Think of somebody who's wiry. He can jump fake anybody. He's like a knife going through traffic, when he gets up to the rim.
Hmm.
And he's got range, and he's a defender, and he's got the toolkit.
Well, now I'm trying to think of who that would be
I know.
without
I'm
even
trying to
seeing the
think of.
kid. Is he a guard or is he a forward?
He's a wing.
He's a wing.
Yeah, he can do any of it,
Huh.
and he can play on the blocks. Sometimes they ask him to do that because here we are at high school. Not everybody can play.
Oh,
You
yeah,
don't
yeah.
necessarily have a dedicated center, but he's probably 6'2" now. Maybe like 170, 165.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And a freshman, that's pretty good for a freshman.
Oh, he's a sophomore now. He's going to
He's
be
a
a
sophomore
junior
now.
next
Oh, okay.
year. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, he's it'll be interesting. But again, like Class C, I guess it's just loaded, and now there's
Even
Caribou.
more now.
I feel horrible. Like Orono and Caribou are coming down.
Yeah.
Madanalco graduates no one, and GSA's enrollment is such that it can go from Class C to Class D based on the numbers that are going to be coming in next year. So I don't know how that's going to shake out. I'll root
That's
for
yeah, because
whatever.
you messaged me about that. Like the enrollment number
Mhm.
comes down, and I meant to ask somebody like, is there a cutoff date for the number? Because they've already had appeals, and the appeals have all been denied, and
Yeah.
so, but I don't know if the actual number comes in lower, if that changes it, or if there's just a date, and there's like, well, everybody's on the same date because everybody's number is
Yeah.
going to move a little bit.
And that number that's on the current list is 254, I want to say, if I'm
Hmm.
correct. And I think the cutoff is 220. But that number of 254 isn't even accurate. Right now they're
Right.
around 220, which certainly could be Class C, but I think next year it's about 190. And
Wow. Yeah, there's some
yeah,
schools that just drop quite a few. Like I think Brunswick lost a bunch of kids
yeah.
before the last cycle, and it's a moving target at that
And
point.
and especially like Narraguagus and Woodland have been rivals in my 2 seasons here, and there's been some good games back and forth between them, and they've now dropped to D. So the
Hmm.
question is, do you leave them on the schedule and get fewer points and
Right.
play these games against the teams you've been playing, or do you take it on the chin, and heel points with your wins? You get your maybe 3 out of the 4, and you don't move the needle in the standings.
Well, what I found is that I've rerun the last couple years I've rerun it with a different weight because the heel
Mhm.
points have a weight based on the class, and the weight doesn't really do much. It
Right.
moves you very little. It's more about how many games does the team you play win
Yeah.
and how much are they worth. So that's really, and sometimes that can be hard to predict because you think, oh, these guys are going to be pretty good, and then all of a sudden they're 4-14. You're like, well,
Right.
great, now they're not worth anything. Like
Yeah.
the
Like
Cowboys,
we
they just fall apart.
GSA beat Bucksport the second week of the second game of the season. I was like, wow, that's a shocking win to beat Class B Bucksport at
Hmm.
Bucksport, and then Bucksport goes on to finish 3-15. And
Yeah,
so it's not as big a deal as you might have thought back
it's like we're
then
gonna
when
get a lot
Bucksport.
of help points from this one, and then nope, maybe
So
not.
yeah, like I think privately, I don't know if a school cares where they are in a class. Like I like GSA. I have my son's going to go there next year,
Hmm.
and I root for that school to do well. But I also know they're challenged because we're in a school choice area, and kids can choose to go to Bucksport or to Ellsworth, and meanwhile, we can't take from Bucksport or from Ellsworth because they're locked into their high school choices.
Oh, okay.
So it's like it's a one-way funnel out. No one comes in. Everybody out, no one in.
I think Wiscasset has that problem too.
Yeah, probably so.
Because a lot of the towns around Wiscasset are school choice,
Like
and the
Edgecombe, I
Wiscasset
remember.
yeah, and the
Mhm.
Wiscasset program's been so bad for so long. They're getting a little bit better now
Yeah,
that you're just like if you're in one of the school choice towns, do you want to go there?
right.
You know, do you want to sit in Red Eats traffic every day all
Yeah.
summer? You
It's
know,
fun.
there's also that.
We camped at Chilwaukee Campground in Wiscasset for
Yeah,
several summers in a row, so I know the area and I know Red Eats very well in
yeah,
traffic.
it's a
Yeah.
whole thing. Yeah, but
Yep.
that the school choice thing can be a real like hindrance and can be a real help depending
Hmm.
on how it shakes out for you. And you know, if you're a good program or in a school choice area, you're gonna draw the better players in that area because you want to play on the best team and you want a chance to win a gold ball.
And exactly. But do you want to go? There's I think a case study from not so long ago where somebody chose Ellsworth.
Okay.
Would have started at GSA as a freshman, played JV on Ellsworth as a freshman. So what's your better choice? Like I don't know. It's that his career is going to play out as it is.
What you do
But
is you go to GSA and then you get in the transfer portal and you
yeah,
and you see
exactly.
how much NIL money Ellsworth has
Yeah, then they end up
and
at
then
Mount
you go
Abram.
from there. I
Yeah.
heard someone joking, someone had an eighth grader who was really good, and
Mhm.
I heard the joke, they're like, go to Valley for a year or to one of these D schools where you can play as an eighth grader,
Yeah.
play as an eighth grader, and then go to the school in your actual home district.
I'm expecting to see Quinn Pelletier at Wyndham next year.
I think Chad Pulkinen would take him. I
Yeah,
think, you know,
he's a
that would be something.
he's a wild kid to watch for sure. He's
I
bigger than
haven't seen him.
I haven't seen him in person, but you heard the legend of the eighth
Yeah.
grader from up north, like he's Sasquatch, and then all of a sudden everybody's in Bangor and there he is. But I did see him in a game against Fairfield prior, and he like drained a two third quarter or court shot, and I'm like, who is this kid? He's 6'2", he's filled out and probably still growing, and
There was like that with Cooper too. You had like this like there's a sixth grader,
I'm sorry I
Nokomis.
missed that era.
You that
That
was
would have been a
fun.
lot of fun. This actually turned me into a Duke fan for the first time ever. Like I just never rooted for Duke.
I grew up a Duke fan because
Okay.
Bobby Hurley was my guy when
Okay.
I was whatever age that was, not
Sure.
very old,
Yeah.
and I was like a scrappy white kid point guard who was the coach's
Okay.
kid, and so I'm like Bobby Hurley, that's my guy right
Yeah.
there.
So dating myself, Chris Mullen was my guy
Okay, sure,
because
yeah.
I was that kind of guard, and I would shoot. My range was 15 to 18 feet,
Yeah. And
and
we didn't get
I,
to see any of these guys on TV or on the internet. Like I read a Sports Illustrated for Kids article about him.
okay.
And I had never seen him play, obviously. He was still in high school. And there was this article about him and about his father, who's obviously a legend,
Yep.
and his brother, who became a legend. And
Hmm.
there's like, he's going to Duke. I'm like, that's my guy. That's my team then. I think I was 10, maybe, something like that. And I was like, okay, a perfect age.
Yeah, it's funny who you latch onto, and I've liked St. John's to this day, and Virginia is another school I latch onto for a random reason. Is I almost went to graduate school down in Charlottesville, Virginia,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
the year I was choosing that, they had an undefeated football team that reached number one in the country, and so I was really
Yeah.
excited about that. But I had no connection to Virginia, but yet somehow then cut to however many years ago, Kyle Guy and Ty Jerome, they win the national title in the NCAAs, and I'm rooting for them like it's the Red Sox breaking the curse. It's
Like you went there.
like I went there. I did not.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you get to Blue Hill and
Hmm.
Castine, did they? This is the thing I've always wondered about that part of the country and like sports writers and journalists in general. Like, did they sit you down and go, okay, here are all of the Class C North names.
Yep.
Here's how to pronounce them. Here's how to spell them.
Yep.
here's here's all of the weird quirks of
Yep.
that region.
A little to some degree, that there was definitely like, I think it was more or less. So when you're writing these are names you're going to have to learn how to spell, like
Yeah,
Narraguegas,
yeah,
Madanawcook. I'm like, okay, but it was also overwhelming. Like I just knew that whatever they were telling me, I wasn't really absorbing. I was just like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to pull this off? And
Yeah.
not knowing, it was a surreal time because literally we had just moved here. We had two kids that were starting in a new school at an impressionable age. My wife's got a new job, and I'm just like, I just got to write
You're
sports art.
renting.
Yeah,
You've never
we got to
written sports
house.
before.
Yep, yep. And so yeah, there was it was. I wasn't instructed so much. I think they had a lot of faith that I could do it. And I think that those original soccer articles, and I look back at those, and I ran a little wild, and now I'm being, I can't run as wild as I used to, but I was running like 900, 1,200 word stories. And
Oh,
I was able to be a little flowery, and I was able to speak to the action a little bit, and put the quotes in where I needed them to, and just kind of run with it. And I didn't pay attention to however many column inches I'm allowed. I just did this thing. And
yeah.
because they went to the state title game, it was a big enough story
They're gonna
that
let you run with it because you're the front page story.
right, exactly.
It's
And
much more interesting than the Facebook Live meeting in the church where someone
yes,
can't hear the audio.
right. And it sort of set the tone for, okay, the bar is already really high with these first 2 weeks on the job, the bar was high. And I just had to kind of live up to my own expectations at that point. And everything I submitted kept going in, and people would see me on the street and say, "Wow, I read your story. That's great." And it was kind of a buzz because GSA hadn't been covered for years, and suddenly there's
Oh, so they
somebody
must
who's
have loved you.
they were so appreciative. The kids were appreciative. It was so great. I remember, a girls' basketball game I was at early in the season, and one of the JV players had a camera next to me, and she just looked at me and she's like, "Do you think you're going to be able to come to all of our games?" And I was like, "Well, all of the home games, I'm going to try." And it's like, that's really great. We really haven't had that before.
Yeah.
And and knowing that she was a sophomore, she hadn't seen it before. And in fact, that entire senior class, the seniors had not seen that before because they were freshmen who came in after COVID or during COVID.
So
So
did they just
nobody,
lose? They lost the sports reporter during COVID or something?
they just, yeah, because there were no sports, so there was nothing
Sure.
for her to cover, and she moved on. And I've seen some of her work before, and it was pretty good,
Okay.
but it wasn't on their radar at that point. And looking back at where the teams were, there were no wild success stories in terms of team playoff appearances and going too far down the road. I think there were a couple good cross country runners, but nothing earth shattering. So
Right.
I just kind of looked at it like, all right, well, I want to treat this job as though I'm not writing for the newspaper, but I'm writing for these kids,
Yeah, that's a good
because
way to
I
look at it.
realized that, yeah, the way it's like a little scrapbook for them, when if I can do this, and I want to represent. There's always a best player on every team. There's a star player, but I don't want to get that star player's photo in every paper. I want to spread it
Right.
around, and I want to spread the quotes around while recognizing the seniors, because I know you're a sophomore and I know you're great, but next year and the year after, I'm going to quote you. I'm going to get your quote more,
Yeah.
and you're going to get your time. And
Well, because in an area like that, like the Bangor Daily News, because they've only got like two guys, they're not
mhm,
going to send anybody out there to cover them
no,
like
no,
back in the 80s they would have, and so you're the paper of record for their careers, the same
yeah,
way that the Lincoln County News is in the Mid Coast,
exactly.
and the Mid Coast Villager is for Oceanside and Belfast,
Hmm.
and the Calais paper is for those teams. And like with my job, we print seems like half of those papers,
That's
and
crazy.
so
Yeah.
you see all of these little things, and they're like hyper focused on Washington County, or they're hyper focused on Deer Isle, Stonington, or
Right.
whatever. And because there's a lot of the pockets where the Bangor Daily News and the Press Herald and Varsity Maine, they just can't cover because they
Hmm.
don't have the manpower, and they're not going to be able to send someone 2 hours to cover
Right.
this regular season game between two teams that are like sixth or eighth or something
Yeah.
in the
Yep.
standings, because that's not possible.
Hmm.
So someone like you becomes super important to that community as the person chronicling that season.
I was super, yeah, and I, not to pat myself on the back, but I recognize that it's been happening, and I've gotten to know parents, and I just people are thanking me,
Yeah.
but I thank them as well. And I go to all these award ceremonies, and there's the last one, the athletic director called me up to present me with a GSA sweatshirt. She said it was time for me to
Oh,
get my own swag.
you're getting
So
swag.
I guess now I am no longer an amateur reporter. Now that I've taken from the school, I'm gonna have to forfeit my amateur status. But
That's really
it isn't
a sign is when you start getting swag.
right,
When
and
schools start sending you shirts, that's when you've arrived, I think.
it's cool. And I'll see these kids in town, and I'll stop and talk to them. And some of the kids who graduated last year, I've seen them back, on campus, and I'll talk to them. How you doing? How's this school treating you? And I can see what's going to happen. I can see these relationships are going to build over time as these kids graduate. And I'm sure I'm going to see, they're going to go through college. And then if I keep this job, 8, 10 years down the road, I'm going to see some of their wedding announcements. It's going to be
Oh
wild.
yeah.
I model a little of what I do after a guy, who did it in my hometown in Mount Washington Valley, New Hampshire. And his name is Lloyd Jones, and he's been doing it since the mid 80s. I found an article that he wrote about my soccer team my senior year in high school, but he's, I used him as a reference when I applied for this job here, and he said this is going to be so rewarding for you. He's going, you're going to love this. You're going to do a great job with this, and he's right, and I can see where it's rewarding. And it's funny because I get praise just for telling these kids stories.
Yeah.
But all I'm doing, they're writing the stories. I'm just putting them out there. And it's
Yeah, I get a version of that, especially like during tourney week of people coming up like, "Oh, thanks for blah blah blah, thanks for
yeah.
talking about us or whatever." Or there's a little bit of a, "Hey, like you're not going to talk about us? What's the deal with that?"
I don't envy some of the what you deal with, because I know you've gotten some. You're more statewide. It's like, what about the Lawrence girls?
Like I picked them.
Mhm.
We did a wins draft and I picked them. They were like my second pick.
But I think how do you preface you like I build a web sheet that hates your team or a spreadsheet
Yeah,
that hates your team, and
everybody is convinced that it's biased against them for some reason.
yeah, and just sticking with one school, I'm good that way. I don't cover anybody else.
You're
I'm
allowed
a
to be
homer.
biased then.
Yeah, I'm a homer, but I do treat things fairly. But I also have MMA though. I technically
That's
I'm
true.
covering a college team too. So
And
and
Deer
that's
Isle.
yeah. Well, the Deer Isle is a different reporter for the papers,
Okay,
and
right.
yeah. So I don't cover Deer Isle personally, but um, yeah, I do GSA and MMA and
Well, a fun story about the spreadsheet that hates your team is when I was
yeah.
anonymous and like it was not a well kept secret, but before it was when it was really anonymous, one and my brother was still the JV coach for Madomic. He
Mhm.
go one of the kids was complaining about it. And he's like, and I was also doing the stats for Madomic for their varsity.
Yeah.
I was doing all their stats for Nick and everything. And this kid's like, he's like, oh, they don't know anything about us. They don't see us. They don't know how good we are. And he's complaining to my brother. And he's like, no, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he's aware.
Yeah.
He's got a pretty good read on you, I think.
Yeah, it's the numbers don't lie, but I'm sure next year there's going to be a team that's in your crosshairs on the spreadsheet that everybody's
Mm-hmm.
going to feel it. You just got to you've
It's
got a following. I mean, how
it's
many people?
it's building. So
Yeah.
it's fun.
Oh,
It's fun.
I'm a lurker. I don't tend to post so much on your social media channels because I'm Switzerland. I'm
Yeah.
just a GSA reporter. I don't want to have an opinion. I'm not paid to have an opinion. I'm paid to tell stories, and but I do definitely observe some of the shenanigans that
Some
go
of the
on.
chaos. Some of it I'm poking the bear on occasion.
Yes, I
Just
noticed
to
you do that too.
just to rile people up. And then I'll just walk away. I'll
Hmm.
like post something inflammatory sometimes, and then the comments will start rolling in, and I'm like, mute comments.
I think my
Okay.
favorite is when you're like, "How come you posted this?" And you just kind of say, "Because I can," and then just
Yeah.
leave. It's my
What I need
website.
what I really need next year is I need like another mad parent who causes a scene. I need a
Yeah.
couple of those videos because those are great. Those are great
Yeah.
for the engagement. It's like 95% people going, look at this idiot. And then
Yep.
5% going, oh, no, you don't understand. The refs were
He
really
had it
bad.
coming. That's the I know. I kind of I feel like at some point this summer when it's a little quieter, I really want to do some sort of deep dive into officiating in the state of Maine
Yeah.
because man, yeah, like nobody has it coming to them. You know, you can you can yell at a ref, but no, no, you go do it. Oh, there's I could go on this topic forever. You know.
I had a couple refs come up to me during the tournament, and because I have a long history of making fun of them.
Yep.
And a couple of them came up to me during the tournament. They're like, thank you for posting these videos that show how insane these people are.
Good.
Because
Yeah.
it sort of shines a light, and that's the best disinfectant is to shine a light on it and go, look at these idiots over here. And then I still make my Peter Webb All-Star jokes, which I don't know if people understand him anymore because he's been gone for a while.
But I've come to understand what they mean, but I didn't get
Yeah.
it at first. I was just like, oh, Peter Webb joke, and now I get it.
I don't know who that is, but all right.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Who's that? Google. You know, but I think I had one interaction with a ref. You know, I'll typically stand baseline with my camera, and you know, a lot of times the ref will stand right in front of me, and I'm like, oh, great, thanks. You know, but
Yep.
you're doing your job, so I'll defer. But I caught one who was having a particularly bad night with the fans. And during a timeout, I just kind of was like, how's your night going? He looked at me, he's like, not so good. You know, it's just like it was this human moment, you know. It's like
Yeah.
everybody's yelling at him and he's trying, and you
They're
know,
all
there's a
doing their
lot of
best.
referees who've been doing it for like probably 30 or 40 years. And it's a fitness challenge. And there's only two of them most times. And
Yeah.
I
I
don't know.
mean,
I hope
my hot take on not a hot take, but my take on the refs is they can be better, absolutely. And one
yeah,
of the reasons they're not better is because there's not more of them.
right.
And so some of the people that it's just like it's like a basketball team. Like if you've only got 7 kids on the team, 2 of those kids who are playing probably shouldn't be playing
Hmm.
and should be on the bench because if you
Yeah.
had more people. So we've lost some really good officials because they're just like, "Ugh, screw this."
Right.
And I've had talked to some and like seen their schedules and the amount of driving they do.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Like they're on the road every night. They're like, oh yeah, I got to go an hour and a half up to Lawrence tonight, and then
And
tomorrow I got to
what's
go
the
to
pay?
Mount
Like
Blue.
$90?
Yeah, something like that. Like 90
Yeah.
bucks in mileage or something. It's not
Hmm.
much. They're mostly doing it for. I mean, they're almost entirely doing it for the love of the game.
Right. And there's a lot of schools in this state and a lot of nights where there's games, and
Yeah,
it can't be easy. But
it's a
I
big
tell you,
state.
yeah, and you want you can't play the games without them. So
No,
if fans can sort of realize that, the GSA fans have been great. I think we had one episode with a visiting parent who was told to go cool off and apologized and cooled off and then was allowed back in.
that's
But
good.
but there's still, open your eyes. There's yeah, but it goes both ways. And I think you always feel like a victim. It's like Google reviews, no one really goes on Google review to praise people as much as they go on
No,
Google review because they have an axe to grind. So you're
yeah.
not gonna. When do you sit there and somebody yells out of the stands, "That's an amazing call, ref! Great job!" You don't hear that. You just don't. You
Well, you
hear about
might,
all
but
the.
they might be joking.
Yes, exactly. They don't get a lot of praise from the bleachers.
And look at that call on Cooper at the end of the
Yep.
national semifinal. Like that's a legitimately terrible call, and that's
Yep.
one of the better officials in the whole country.
Hmm.
And you have to like in the NCAA, you have to advance to that game. It's not just you're the buddy of the assigner, and so you get the state title game.
Yeah, that
Like that's
was.
a good official, and that was an abysmal call.
Yep. Homerism aside, yeah, you got to look at that. But yeah, it's officials are it's tough. All sports, you look at it and wish it could be better. Instant replay is great, but yet also it can just suck a lot of time out of the games. And
A lot of time out of the game.
yeah, so I
It's
don't
like,
know.
I'm gonna go get a drink. Let's see. I'll come back in 10 minutes and see if they've played 30 seconds of this thing.
Yeah,
Go
I
put the
wonder
kid
where
to bed.
the exactly.
All
So
right, so
what
let's
else?
look at next year. How's GSA gonna look next year in basketball? Boys and girls.
Pretty good. I'm excited for the GSA team. They're going to lose two seniors who both were starters. Isaiah Riddell and Tristan Chamay are going to be graduating, but they're going to have the two leading scorers back in Colby Eaton and Malcolm Page, and a couple freshmen, Spencer Young and Larson Wooten and Wyatt Young, who all got valuable minutes, and they've got some talent. But the problem is Class C is also loaded, and with Orono and Caribou coming down, that's going to just be difficult to gain traction on that. So they're going to be a better team. Will it be reflected in their record or how far they go in the playoffs? You just don't know, because it seems like you can't have the Class B champion come down to Class C, can you really? The last two Class B champs?
Yeah, that's going to be rough on both sides.
Do you wonder if they want that? Like
Caribou, I can't imagine Caribou does.
No, probably not.
And you have Penobscot Valley girls going down to D.
Yeah, and arguably they could compete in A.
Yeah. Well, they scrimmaged Lawrence last year before the tournament and beat them. Is what I
think
heard.
They're going to lose a couple players though. Riley Moulton, I think.
Yeah, but they're going to be a wagon.
Yeah, they are, and they're going to roll through everybody, and it's a shame because Mattanacook girls are a good enough team to give them a game, as they proved in the regional finals. It was like a 4-point game. So yeah, the boys team's going to be good. I'd love to see where they're going to be. If you told me they're going to be in D, I can tell you they're going to compete for at least a Final Four type of bid. Okay. If you tell me they're going to be in C, the goal will be to get to cross.
Okay. And everybody's going to be figuring out what this new C looks like, these new regions, because I think they're going to be a lot more competitive across the board. And I think that's going to be good overall, but it's going to also just be a lot harder to advance to where you're used to being able to advance in previous years.
Right. And then I guess Mountain View is moving from north to south, which is
I think
practical,
so.
I guess, because Mountain View, the 2 years I've been here, they've been this unknown team going into the tournament because they haven't played a single team in C North, and yet they're coming in like, okay, they're the 8th seed this year. I'm like, I'm picking them to win.
The year they went on that run, that was like the easiest prediction for a Cinderella dark horse, because I'd seen them. I'd seen them early in the year, and then I watched them
probably right
at Madomic. And then I watched them nearly beat Madomic at their place, and then they nearly beat Lincoln Academy at late in the year, and they gave Oceanside some trouble. And I'm like, they're going into C? Those are the three best teams in B.
I think there were 7 seed that year.
Yeah, and I'm like, so you're telling me the team that nearly beat the 3 best teams in B South is going to C North?
Right.
And they're going to be the 7? Yeah, that's I'm picking them. That's
I think
good money for that on DraftKings.
They were in the title game against Calais, and I'm just like, I was telling anybody who listens, like, they're going to beat them by double digits, and nobody's like, no, they're not, and they ended up winning by like 30 in that title game, and so they're going to move, which is good. I just don't know. I'd love to. I kind of hope for D. I'd love to see them be in a spot where they're able to compete for the title, Right. But and again, you are where you are. But if your number is 190, I'd love for you to be competing with the 100 to 220 group instead of the 220 to 400, because I know Foxcroft is also going to be down there, and that's going to be a tough ask for GSA boys.
The problem you might have though is they just won 3 straight, and so everyone's like, "Yeah, I think you guys are okay for a while."
Right.
Yeah. You don't have one of those 50-year droughts to work with.
That's true. We're not going to get any sympathy votes for that.
Yeah, it's hard to get sympathy votes when you're like.
This is about my career, This is about my state title chase. I have not gotten one of these. I've lost a state title game. I've lost a couple of regional title games in soccer. I want my state. I want my.
Have you covered the tournament at Cross yet?
I have not. I've been credentialed, but I think I mentioned to you once. I've at this stage of my fledgling career, I'm looking at Cross as sort of the Stanley Cup. I'm not allowed to touch it unless I've earned it. I can't go there until my team has earned the passage there. And,
but the thing
both years, I'm 0 for 4 in Cross games. They've lost in the prelim, boys and girls, both years. And next year,
it'll just be. I'm thinking for your fledgling career, it's really helpful to get to the tournament sites and be there for a little bit, because that's where you meet everybody.
Stanley Cup.
You know, like up there, it's like, Carmichael will be there,
Yeah,
and Bob Beetham and Stax and all those guys, and meeting them in person, it's just way different than
right.
talking to them on Twitter. If you're in the South, it's like Dave Eads there, and Travis Lee and Hoffer
Hmm.
and all those guys, and then it's much easier to like sort of be. It's easier to feel like you're a real journalist when you're in the club with everybody else, and on press row with everybody, than it
Right,
is to
right.
just be like on Twitter and like talking shit, like talking about the Celtics or
And it's
something.
funny because I look at like the press row and I see an empty seat. I'm like, I wonder if my name's right there because
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be there. But
Well, I
I
got
still,
my name for the state game is the
yeah,
first time they put my name on press row.
nice.
They spelled it wrong, but it was
All
there.
right, nice. That's all right.
So,
I feel like I still don't look at myself as a journalist, really. It's
right.
funny because
That's what you need is you need the trip to cross.
well, the trip to the regional final soccer game, and that was at Bangor, and
Mm-hmm.
somebody came up to me and goes, "Hey, Larry Mahoney's here." I was like, "Great, who's that?" I
Oh,
guess
yeah,
you're not supposed to say that in Maine, but again,
no,
this
you're not
was
supposed
my
to say that.
second game ever, and I'm at a regional final, and it's like that's him right there, that guy interviewing the GSA player. I'm like, oh, and so
You're
he's a
supposed to know
reporter.
who Larry Mahoney is. Yeah,
He's a
that's a
reporter
definite.
too, but again, 4 days into my career, so I
Yeah,
didn't know, but I never made that mistake again. I haven't seen him again. Um,
he's a nice guy.
but yeah, that's what I hear. I hear he's a legend. So, and
Yeah,
3,000 articles to his now I'm well versed, so now I can introduce myself. Before,
yeah, yeah. That's
yep,
an own goal, as they say in soccer.
I'm just a rookie. I hear out in the field, just trying to
Yeah,
pave my
yeah,
way in this tough cutthroat business. But
yeah. You're like, I don't know. All right, so how are the GSA girls going to look?
they're going to be pretty good too. They let's see, they graduate a couple seniors, but they're going to return their two leading scorers in Hallie Clifford, who's dynamic as a point guard and just great athlete in all the sports she plays. Taylor Grego and Layla Hutchins were sophomores this year. They're both in the front court, and they have rebounding, they have size, and they're growing into their coordination from freshman year to sophomore year.
Oh
You
yeah,
can
sure.
see their footwork's gotten a lot better, and their basketball IQ's gotten better, and they're more assertive, and they're able to shoot from further around the court there. And I think they'll make a quantum leap from sophomores to juniors. They had a freshman come in this year, Aurora Simmons, and I think she was learning how to play on that level, and she can just jump through the gym. So I think right there with that nucleus of those four, combined with some of the veterans who were on the bench and would see 15 to 20 minutes a game,
Hmm.
they could be in a good place too. And the athletic director is their coach, Billy LaRue, and she has a storied basketball background at St. Joseph's College. She's in the
Yeah,
Hall of Fame.
yeah,
So and
sure.
so it's they look good as well. But again, they're Mackinac Cook brings everybody back. I don't know if Caribou's going down and see, and
Well,
they can beat Oro now.
Caribou lost to Prey, so there's that.
Right,
Because she graduated. But if you go down to D, then you got Penobscot Valley.
right. Yeah, that's a good
So
point. So it's and Dexter's going to lose some people. I think Dexter and Central have been the hurdle that GSA girls need to get over, and they've
yeah.
gotten closer this year. And next year, Dexter loses some people. Central has Mary Allen coming back, who's probably going to score her 2,000th point next year.
Oh
She's
right, she's coming back. I have to
yes,
rethink my Miss Basketball strategy for that because
that's
she won't
she
win.
is.
I don't think she'll win, but I'll be probably Provost. But so then it's Provost, Allen, and somebody else for the finalists. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm making mental notes.
Somebody's going to come through that you're not thinking of too, though.
There's always that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
and but yeah, Mary Allen, she's a pretty good player. 1,000 points as a junior, but she also
Yeah.
runs track in the winter season.
Okay.
And
Really?
is
The same? I didn't know that. That's how you
yeah,
stay in
and
shape for basketball. That's how you do
yeah,
it.
and she consistently finishes like top two. And I think what's her event, like 400 meter. She's
Okay.
really good at that.
See, I ran cross country solely to get in shape for basketball. It's the only reason I did it.
Really?
Yeah. When I
Yeah.
was in high school back in the day.
So basketball was your favorite sport,
Basketball is my sport, yeah.
right?
And then
Okay.
I ran cross country, but that was really just to get in shape for basketball season.
Okay.
And then I didn't do a spring sport because we didn't have a spring sport because I went to a tiny, tiny, tiny school.
Really?
Yeah,
No spring sport.
no spring sport. We just had cross country and basketball and
Okay.
volleyball for the girls.
All right. Well, I did soccer. That was my favorite to play. My best sport was basketball. So
Okay.
I was,
They added
and
soccer after I left.
oh, okay. All right.
So
And
they won a couple state titles, and because I went to a school in the Christian League, and so they won a couple state titles in soccer after I graduated,
mhm.
and we won one state title, and then my brother won like three,
Really?
I think. Yeah, they were ridiculous.
I have
That
no
team.
hardware. I have no hardware. My soccer team did lay claim to be the first Kennett High School soccer team to ever win a playoff game, and that was phenomenal. So, but
Oh,
I like to this day, and I watched. Okay, so this is going back to my 2023 GSA soccer team, the first kids I covered.
yeah.
That lost to Mount Abram in the title game, but eight of those kids, eight of those starters were coming back. They were going to be good, and this was the mission to get back to that game.
For
And
last
they,
year.
yeah, and they didn't. They fell short. They were upset in the regional finals to Washington Academy, and they'd beaten WA 7-0 and 3-0
Ooh,
in the regular season, and just didn't have it that night. And I watched them, and I'm also seeing my own last game on the pitch. It against Conval in Southern New Hampshire, and they're number one. And
hmm,
we're not supposed to beat them, but we were in this game, and we were down 1-0 with about 10 or 15 minutes to play. And I'm
yeah.
running all over the field, and I'm not playing my position because I'm just like, we got to score, we got to get a goal, and just all over the place. And they scored to make it 2-0, and I'm sitting there trying to mathematically think, okay, 2 goals in 10 minutes, we can do this, we can do this. Never mind, we're being outshot like 26 to
You're
6. We're
lucky to
gonna
be down
score
2-0. Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna score 2 goals somehow here. And I just remember it was a snowy November day, and it was just like light flurries. And I remember when the final horn sounded, I was like still thinking we're gonna win this game. And I just sat down at midfield and just stayed there. And then just like that's how those kids felt. They
Yeah.
didn't get back to the title game. And it
Especially at
was
that level, because it's not like you're going to play in college or anything like that.
yeah, it's it. And then I'm friends with these kids, and there's hugs after the game, and I'm telling them, you're going to think about this game, but I promise you, you're going to end up thinking about this game and smiling about it. You don't know that now, but and then you're going to go through the weight
Probably,
of it.
yeah. It'd be different. Depends on how you lose that game.
They lost 4-0. They
4-0.
just
So then
yeah they
you'll smile.
yeah it unraveled. They were in it at halftime, and then it unraveled. And
There's some that you will not look back and smile
right.
at. The Biddeford girls will not look back at that game
Oh no, they
and
won't.
smile.
No, they won't. Quinn Corrigan will look back at that game and
Yeah,
smile.
definitely. But
That's a
yeah,
moment.
it depends on how it ends.
Right, but it's like, and these GSA kids, they're wise. I think maybe kids in general are wiser than a lot of people give them credit for,
They're a lot smarter than we were.
Yeah, and they talk about, this is their family. These are the kids they're gonna, they're best friends for life. There's a brotherhood, and a sisterhood when you're playing these games. And I remember the GSA girls soccer team this year, another remarkable story in that they were not so great in 2023.
Hmm.
And then they had to drop down to the 8-player division because they just only had 9 players, period. So they're going into that. And next thing you know, they're in the regional finals.
Wow.
And there was a little team that could up against Dexter, who for some reason was allowed to play in the 8-player division with about 17 players on their roster. And to this day, we're not quite sure how that happened. But
There's a point of contention with
there is a
football with
point of
that too.
contention when they roll out on a big bus. If you can't have a big yellow bus with an 8-player division, you got to be able to fit in a little bus.
You got to be on the short
And
bus.
yes, you got to be in the short bus, exactly. And so they lost that title, the regional final, by 1 goal, and there was just like so many tears, and I'm trying to get words from them. And I'm like trying not to get choked up myself. I'm like, oh my god, I'm falling for this. But it's there. They all care so much for themselves at this, at the high
Well,
school
it
level.
sounds like you found a career that works for you as long as that career remains viable with publishing. Who knows?
Exactly. And I think this paper is in a good place. It serves a community. And I know, famous last words, but journalism is tough right now.
Hmm.
And, small town newspapers are tough. And
Well, I can tell you that we ship them to New York City.
Oh, nice.
There's
Okay.
because part of my job is making sure they get mailed to all the people who have subscriptions.
Cool.
And there's New York City, there's a bunch of different places that get sent them, and we there's one on, where is it? It's on the park. It's on like Central Park West or something. It's like a
All
really
right.
expensive building. So somebody from Castine has done very well for themselves.
Nice. And
So,
that's fantastic to hear. Yeah, and I do think I found a career, and I'm like, this is where my family is going to go to school at this
mhm.
school, and I'm lucky to have this opportunity. I enjoy it a lot, and I look forward to continuing to cultivate the relationships I have, and finally getting across one of these years, and
You'll make it.
I'll make it. I'll make it.
You'll
And
make it.
yeah, and I know like the cross country program here is fantastic, and they've really made some noise on the state level, and they've got a couple possibilities for state titles this year in cross country, and that's a giant team. They've got 47 kids going on. It's like 20% of the entire student body
Jeez.
is doing cross country. So it
Jeez.
speaks to the
Where
coaching
can
there.
people read you? There's the Castine Patriot, and then what's the other one?
The weekly packet,
Weekly Packet, right? I
weekly
have Weekly
packet.
Packet over here. Hold on.
Yep.
Let me
And
grab my
that comes
Weekly
out,
Packet.
as you can imagine, that comes out weekly
Yep.
in a packet. And yep, that's it. And
They come out. Well, we print them on Wednesdays, so I don't know when
yep,
they actually and make it
Thursday
back up there.
mornings.
Thursday
Yep,
mornings.
Thursday
Okay.
mornings it'll be out there. And we have an online presence. It's a paywall, but
Yeah.
you can find me there, and I will do my best to tell the stories of
And where
the
can people
working
find your
influence.
novel that they can then purchase if they don't
On
buy it off you? So if you're at a game, a GSA
Mhm.
game, you'll have them in your car, right? For people
I've,
to
I've
just buy
retired.
after the game.
I have one in my glove compartment because it's been so long now that I'm like rereading it. And I'm like, it's all new to me.
Yeah. You should have like 10 or so in the trunk of your car. Maybe you could like sell them on the sidelines.
Remember, I told you I'm not so good at self promoting.
Well,
This is Yeah, this is the
people
most
can
I've
come.
talked about my novel in 10
What
years.
I'm saying is that people can come up to you and say, "Hey,
Right,
Eric, let me get one of them novels."
right.
And then you can go into an alley somewhere, get it out of the back of your car, be like, "You got cash? You got to have cash. It's got to be cash." And it'll be very shady.
This is probably where someone from the paper sees this podcast, and this is where the paper realizes that I wrote a novel in a past life. I don't even know if
Yeah.
anybody knows that I had this previous.
And maybe you can get a raise. You can be like, "Look, novelist right here. Not just a
Raise
sports writer, multiple skills. Like maybe, you need me to write some other features
a raise in
about."
journalism. You think is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
possible?
Or maybe, I mean, I saw in the paper today they're hiring for somebody, so you might be
Yeah,
able to get some more, branch out, get some more work there.
I guess the joke I should have gone was, wait, you mean you get paid for this?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it's a fun job, and I know you feel the same way. You probably feel lucky to be doing what you're doing, and
And getting paid a very little amount.
yeah, but it's enough, right? Because you keep doing it.
I keep doing it because I'm a psychopath.
Well, yeah, it's just part that
I'm a,
too, but that's
I'm
all
a
right.
sicko. I'm an independent filmmaker. I am used to doing a lot of work for very, very little money and justifying it somehow.
Right.
So it comes with the
But
territory.
I think you've got a footprint now, and
Yeah,
if you were to walk away from that, you would be missed. And I think that's kind of a neat
that's
spot to be in.
who would people yell at if not for
Exactly.
me?
They just yell at your website.
They'd be like, "Why is no
Oh.
one answering me anymore? I, I think Falmouth is ranked too high. They just won the state title. Ah, they're too high." All right.
Yeah, Davis Mann isn't as good as people think he is.
Yeah, he's
Right?
overrated.
No, he's overrated.
He can't score in the clutch.
No, and he's got no moves to the hoop. He can't
Nothing.
do any of that.
Nothing. Can't dunk. Terrible.
Where's he going
The-
next year? Do we know that?
I don't know, but I haven't asked. So
Okay, he looks for sure like he should be going somewhere
he's
next
really
year.
good. I still can't believe he's not a Mr. Basketball semifinalist. Like that's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
well, there's only three of them, right? So,
No, there's 10
oh,
semifinalists. He didn't even
oh,
make the first cut.
semifinalists. Okay. Oh, he wasn't even a
He
semifinalist.
wasn't even a semifinalist because
Oh,
the
yeah, that's
vote
probably
the vote is too early, is what it
yeah,
was. I'm convinced. Because if you like were reading the newsletter, you'd be like, "Wow, I keep seeing this Davis Mann name popping up
right,
over and over again." And then by the tournament time, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, Davis Mann, Davis Mann."
right.
And all the votes were in by then. So
Rightfully so. Yeah. What
yeah.
about Theo Powell? Was he?
He
on the
was awesome.
semifinal.
He was on, yeah, he was a semifinalist. He was so good
Yeah,
in the semifinals. No, in the quarterfinals? I think the
quarterfinals.
quarterfinals, he had that
Yeah,
really great game.
yeah. There's
Yeah,
some
he
good
was
players up here. I think looking ahead, Matt Cook's got some players. Andrew Oliver can shoot. Cooper McCarthy's a good floor general. Quinn Pelletier, obviously somebody to look at.
obviously.
Madawaska has Sam Tebow, I want to say his name might be. All of a sudden he just elevates and throws one down, and he does it a
There's
couple times a
way
game.
more dunking than there was when we were kids.
Yeah,
Way more dunking.
I was able to touch the rim if I was lucky.
I couldn't touch the rim.
I barely could get the rim. I could fingertip, and nothing was going to go over that.
Yeah, there's kids in Class D dunking left and right. And I'm like, what is going on? This is nuts.
Yeah, it's a different game.
It is.
I'll tell you, I'll date myself. I even played before there was a 3-point line.
Wow.
I know. Look back at that. I'm younger than I look.
Well, there's that.
No,
All
exactly.
that California living for you.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So.
All right. I know you got to go because you got to put your kid to bed, and I've got to do the same thing because bedtime was 8 minutes ago. But
yeah, I got about 7 minutes. So
yeah. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for talking to me. And hopefully we'll see you at the Cross Center next year or at a soccer game or something.
I'm dreaming. Baseball season's coming up.
That's true. Baseball season.
This year's baseball team: 2 seniors, 1 junior, 2 sophomores. So right away you've got 5.
All freshmen.
10.
Now, well, if it'll stop snowing.
These freshmen have come off like Little League championships, so they are really good freshmen. So we'll see what happens.
All right.
Knocking on wood. All right, Lucas. Cool. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to finally, hang out and chat. Let's do it again someday.
All right. Thanks for doing it. That's
perfect. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
All right. I'm ending the recording. I do not need to play the outros thing.
So.
All right. That's the show. Thanks to Erik for joining me. Spring sports season is on the way. So, if you still have your subscription going, keep it going because Heel Points and all that, and the newsletter, I'm going to probably go weekly on the newsletter. It's not going to go daily during spring sports season because, dear God, is that a lot. Yeah, so more episodes coming up. We'll see. Anyway, so this has been a production of MaineBasketballRankings.com, your source for the most comprehensive coverage of Maine high school basketball from Ashland to York and everywhere in between. This podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts and a bunch of places you don't. If you enjoy this, please leave a nice review because it does really help with algorithms. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Thanks for listening.